really been working on a lot of the data that has come through. We talked a little bit ago about how Gretchen Whitmer's own votes have been off, where they haven't, allocated properly her voting, and then all of a sudden it shows up 4 years later. Talk to me a little bit more about that, and this is really important for people to understand why this is such a widespread problem happening across the state of Michigan.
Yeah, so Gretchen Whitmer's file, completely changed over 3 months. The legislature had lost her missing voting history, 24% of them, like we said. But it's not just that. We found a fully 131 precincts in 57 counties across Michigan that had late or lost votes. One of those counties, and this is not unique to this county, but in Grand Traverse County in Michigan, there are 2 precincts in Long Lake Township and Mayfield Township, in which we looked at the file 1 month after the election, so we gave them plenty of time to get the book squared up. And it showed that 0 people voted in person in these 2 precincts. And they were 1,560 some votes shy of what the Secretary of State's own website was saying. But that's not all. When you look at the Secretary of State's own website, she says that 5.58 million people voted in the election, according to her own website. But according to her own official qualified voter file, which is the only thing that you could use to verify that, it says that 104,000 people fewer voted at 5.48 million people. And when you look at that same official Michigan qualified voter file, month after month, they keep adding votes to the system, apparently, until May of this year, when they had added almost 100,000 votes to the 2020 election. And they're probably still doing it to this day based on the files that we're looking at. So I can't explain that. I can't show any timestamps or any names that show who did this and why. And I don't understand how a Secretary of State can look at this and say this is a secure election and that this is the most transparent, secure election in history. It doesn't make sense. I don't know where that's coming from. And when I talked to to several politicians about this, they go through my presentation and they say, "Oh, those are statistics. I can't, statistics can be manipulated." When I show them this data of their own Michigan qualified voter file, they have no explanation. They can't explain it. They say they'll look into it, and then when we try and set up a meeting, they say we'll have a public hearing on it, whatever, and then it goes nowhere.
Joining us now, live to discuss, Real America's Voice own correspondent April Moss. April, thank you so much again. I feel like I have to say this to our amazing correspondents because you are following something that the rest of media is simply ignoring. So I just want to thank you ahead of this segment for that. But what else did you learn while you were in Michigan?
Well, thank you, Dr. Gina. The most egregious of all of this is the fact that nothing has been done in Michigan to remedy all of the irregularities and anomalies that we have now learned about what has happened in Michigan since November 3rd, 2020. Not one thing has been done. And in fact, there's a current proposal to the Michigan Constitution that Michiganders will have to vote on in November that would permanently amend the Constitution and make it extremely easy for cheating to continue to occur, that it would be part of Michigan law. They want to enact drop boxes in every single township, and that's just the beginning. But the worst of all of it, Gina, is that all of this information from the qualified voter files that the Michigan Election Integrity Force has obtained and spent hours combing through has been given to the elected officials in Michigan, and nothing will be done about it, even though it is a Republican-held legislature.
Boy, April, that is so terrifying. And there are lots of efforts out there. I always talk about American Voters Alliance. People can go there, AmericanVotersAlliance.com, great organization. .org. I'm sorry, AmericanVoters.org. Producer Jason, thank you for correcting me. But April, what else can people do? This is just demoralizing for people, especially those living in states like Michigan, where they are rubber stamping stealing elections.
Yeah, so what everyone has to understand is that the current Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, was put into place largely funded by George Soros's Secretary of State, basically his nonprofit organizations. She is one of those. So what Michiganders need to do is fire her, vote her out, get Christina Caramo in. She is the Trump-endorsed MAGA candidate, America First, person of integrity. I know her very well. She needs to be elected as the next Secretary of State for Michigan. And then everyone needs to be having those Dropbox parties. We've seen them in Arizona and some other states, and they need to happen in Michigan on election night. And I think that once we start to really push back against all of the fraud that we now know, it's taken 2 years for us to go through all of this data. We have video evidence that the Gateway Pundit put out about a week ago, where they have multiple videos of people ballot harvesting and ballot trafficking in Detroit. So it's not a matter of if fraud happened. It did happen, and Michiganders need to remedy it by showing up in person to vote, overwhelming the ballot boxes. And here's the thing. They need to have people doing their mail-in ballots and their absentee voting. They need to have that in order to cheat. So what we need to do is show up in person and show up later. Once you just get in line to vote, even if the line is long, they can't turn you away. If we have enough in-person votes, then they won't have time to cheat as much. So again, it's a long road upwards, and we really need to make sure that America First candidates get into office and again expose the uniparty that's happening in the Michigan legislature. The GOP and the Democrats right now, they're almost one and the same.
Yeah, no doubt about it. April, thank you so much. Those are all great ideas, as well as making sure you don't vote with a Sharpie, because that's a thing. It bleeds through on the back. So just make sure you vote with a ballpoint pen, no matter what they tell you. And volunteer to help at the polls with your local Republican committee, or just with the local precinct folks. So anyway, April, thank you so much for joining us, and do keep us updated.